I think he can qualify as a phenomenologist because he's talking about the moment.
Well, you think that's all phenomenology is just about the moment, but what about, is it your perception or the perception? In other words, Jerry thinks there's an objective perception somehow devoid of your personal dictionary of meanings. Would you say that's true, Gerald?
It's a beautiful way of putting it. I think the experience of God is that. I think it's an objective phenomenon, devoid of any preconceptions.
Well, I tend to think that, because we came up with this about, if you're seeing the rose as a rose and not importing any associations with it, what do you see it?
Well, Zen would say you're seeing a thing without giving it a name, because the name in and of itself is already a distortion of the thing.
Right, that's what Avatar would have said, right?
Yes.
That was their point.
Right.
And if you asked a shaman, he'd be saying you're seeing, an energetic field.
Right.
Right.
Wait, what's your point of view on the thing? Or is it a thing without a name? What is it? Is it objectively a thing, or is it?
Well, the reason, because in phenomenological terms, it's just an is-ness without attributing any identity to it of anything.
But I think.
But in a socially shared world,
Business doesn't even exist because it's a perception. It's an amalgam of your perception and subjective blah blah blah.
Wait, here's the primary question.
Like a Buddhist thought. It's all made up. It doesn't exist.
The primary question, I guess, to determine how to classify you as a metaphysician is sort of like if a tree falls in the forest.
Does it make a sound?
No one's there. Does it make sound?
and we know that it does.
It does make sound.
Yeah, because they put tape recorders over there, and they've
They
recorded. They actually have recorded it.
But if no one's experienced it,
Yeah, but the question doesn't make a sound,
and it does.
But
and the essence of it is that when it falls, it makes a sound,
So
regardless
sound,
of you being there or not.
So sound is not something that,
You're not a determinant of what's happening in the natural world. It happens in of itself.
right?
You're not. It's not important what you think about it, or whether, you're questioning yourself. Does it make a sound or not? Then you're
Yeah.
placing yourself in the center of the experience.
Right.
And in phenomenology, you want to take this. You want the experience to speak to you. You don't want to speak to. It's not relevant what your perception is of a situation.
I thought that phenomenology usually makes quite relevant both the interior and the exterior.
It does.
Right.
Yeah, it
So
does.
both are relevant.
Yeah, but what your job in that case is to be as bias free and prejudice free and preconceivedly free
Mhm.
of anything.
Mhm.
But in a socially shared world, what you got to do? You got to go into the florist and ask for 6 red energy fields. What are you going to ask for? You got to ask for red roses.
Yeah.
Right, because without that consensual perceptual agreement, there can't be any kind of commerce or conducting our relationships at all in the world.
Right.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
Right? But if you want to take the perception down to its root, to catch it before it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
Then you go into a deep phenomenological place of business,
Right.
which is it's going back to, eventually it goes back to the shorthand term God, to whatever that you want to, what all the names that it's called. You're going to the is-ness of existence,
Which is prior to consumption.
to anything.
It's sort of like it's an apperception, what Nisargadatta called an apperception.
Wait a minute, that's what Kant called it. Except for Kant said that there was no apperception without thought. Kant thought as an Enlightenment rationalist.
Well, I
That you
think that
couldn't-
Nisargadatta, I didn't quite know because I had never had an apperception.
Well, it's an apperception. What's
For
your
him, it's before the thought. It's the perception before
the perception?
perception, which is, I think, where he was sort of heading in your phenomenological life of beingness, of being, what did he call it? I am that.
Right.
Well, insofar as you're concerned about being more so than you're concerned about me versus like interior life, exterior life. If you're concerned about being, I guess you're a phenomenologist. That's really, the isness of being is something that encompasses up a lot.
Well, what Heidegger called the isness of the there,
Right. Being there. In the
being
world.
the being of the there.
Yeah. Because the conjunction for Heidegger is there's no subject, there's a being there or a being in the world. It's a conjunction of the subjectivity and the objectivity.
They're coming together, you
They're
mean?
coming together and that's the experience.
Yeah.
So that,
Because in the perceptual experience, when we met, when I said hello, Karam,
yes.
the initial perception was us being one. So you and I were melded, at that moment. Then we step back to identify each other in the socially shared dual world. So we could create an identity for each of us to say hello, Karam, and you said hi, Jerry.
Yeah.
So you would, but then we can go on with our social conduct.
Yeah.
But in the initial perceptual experience, it's a unity.
Right.
And then the identity comes after, in order
Yeah.
to make it such that we can be in the dual world here together.
Right. That's like it sounds like what Heidegger talks about when he talks about average everydayness in terms of when you're just walking around the world and you're meeting people and things. He says that is, it's fundamentally unified. The subjective and the objective are fundamentally unified. It's only when you stop to think about stuff, or if you say that, oh, that's Jerry, I'm Karen.
That stop to create an identity.
That's
An attachment.
a derivative
You want
of
to
the
create an
unity.
attachment, an identity of experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the whole division, the dual, is actually derivative of the unity.
Right.
And that's why
Which is
that's
the
his
way-
critique of all of philosophy, because
Yeah,
it's
so
so
it's-
obsessed with the analytic.
So in the beginning of Genesis, the unity, the oneness created two-ness. Consciousness is an experience of heightened awareness and attention toward invisible, intangible reality. So that intangible reality is, in common parlance, is called spiritual reality. The idea of that is that in a morally shared world in which we want to reshape the disorder of the world and bring it into order, it has to then attach. There's attachments that are given to it through conceptualization and perception to bring us into recognition of the experiences that we're facing in the everyday life with each other. Because the order of experience in everyday life is essentially disorder. And that's meaningful because it's given to us from the universe to have to deal with it so that we can take action toward it in some manner, shape, or form to reform the lived world that we're in, which to date, over the past 5,000 years we know of in the world as we look around, has been one of consistent wars and death and destruction and all of the events that are derived from all of that. And so, so the world has to come to an order of harmony, and its purpose for having been created was for us to come to an order of harmony and love and peace and brotherliness, sisterliness, where we're all living in a socially shared world for the benefit of everybody. That's what's ultimately at stake here. And so the conceptions come as ways to fit us in to this time-space world that we're living in. So the necessity of the conceptions and perceptions is to come as a lived being in the time-space world. So our way of understanding that then is that consciousness is a necessary experience. That state of absoluteness, that absolute awareness, where you might disappear or experience yourself as disappearing, is absolutely necessary to understand the unity of life. But then there's a sufficiency that's required in order to bring that to bear in the everyday life experience. And the way that reminds us to do this are the stressors. The stressors are sent as thorns in our paw to remind us that we have something to do to take charge of our inner state of being, that we have to then seek to respond to these stressors in one of two essential ways. Either we respond with this kind of unified experience that we have gone through or are becoming, and we respond to that stressor with equanimity or equilibrium or balance or sobriety. They're all kind of equivalent terms to each other, synonymous almost. Or we respond with distress. So the issue is never to look at the circumstances as that which we have to take charge, that we have to control, an old term of the power game, power in the service of control. We don't have to control the world around us in this regard. We have to not be subject to being shaped and determined by the circumstances, but rather use that as a reminder to take charge of our inner state of being. It's reminding us to wake up, to move into a greater consciousness in ourselves, and to begin to take over the distresses and remove them, take them out of our change the situation, change the distress into a distress-free experience for ourselves, so that we become more open and alert and aware and awakened. Well, that was the question you were going to ask about Kant. The next question you were going to ask.
Oh, next question I was gonna. Well, the next question I was gonna ask was, sounds like for your definition of consciousness, there is the perception and the conceptualization as because we live in this mutual dual world, and there needs to be this.
Social intercourse.
There needs to be this social dialogue and intercourse.
Right.
And,
There's a socially shared world that we live in that presents perceptions and conceptions all the time.
Right. But the question then, well, it sounds to me like if you were going to expand upon Kant's definition of consciousness, it sounds to me like you would say, I might be wrong, that there's like at least a third aspect of this consciousness that mirrors the one reality. And that third aspect would be a moral compass, some sort of moral gyroscope. Or is that...
There is a moral, I love it. There is a moral gyroscope, a moral compass that's given to us as the way to live a pure stream of life. That we have to live with each other in a way of harmony and peace, without bloodshed and war and deception and lying and stealing and so on, which always has some injurious aspect that's created for others as well as for yourself. And as these injurious aspects are created for ourselves and for others, it diminishes our life force. The life force of the other, the family could be ripped apart, the other that you have done something toward, so their energies can be drained. Your energy gets drained from the way you conduct yourself and so on, and that leads to a diminishment of your life. And that has you turn away from accessing this highly aware absolute consciousness state of unity that's available, and that we're born as one of the purposes for being here on the earth, to find our way to it. But we have to go through this stress-to-stress axis to find our way as a starting point to this consciousness. It's a way given to us in the everyday life to show us that we've gone out of balance. And the moral life, as that's understood, is a balanced life. So you're leading a balanced life in which you're responding with equanimity, equilibrium, sobriety, and balance to the situations that are occurring. And when that happens, it is a sign that your consciousness is enlarging and deepening, and that you are moving toward this unified experience of returning to a spiritual wholeness that is available to us, that you're honoring in your life. Because when we're born here, we're born with the two natures to honor our material life and our spiritual life. And we've been duped into veering too far into honoring the material life and away from our spiritual life, which goes wanting. And without going to honor this spiritual life, our life becomes constricted and full of misery and suffering and pain. That's what I got to say about stress to stress. So we're not managing stress. We're in the business of managing, if you will, our distress.